welcome to Doses of. Today's Doses of is going to be Doses of Brie Hermosillo. Brie Hermosillo is a woman that I met who is a psychic medium. She is an indigenous spiritual guide, and although I haven't personally experienced her work, I know that she is great at what she does. And having known her for a couple of years now and watched her brand evolve into what it is and the services that she offers for people, I know that today's episode is going to be really, really intriguing. She does a beautiful, beautiful job of bridging the gap between the Western mental health world versus the spiritual world, and leaning into the gifts that she was granted from her lineage. So I'm just really, really excited for y'all to watch this episode. And here we go with Brie Hermosillo and her sacred disruption. Enjoy. So we are going to start off with the first question that started this whole series and the theme for this season of this podcast that I've been asking all my guests. The main question is the disruption, the sacred disruption of either systems of trauma cycles or internalized silence that has changed your soul forever, and what therapeutic tools, people, or practices, modalities helped you through that.
Yeah, so a disruption. I've been sitting with this question since you sent me kind of the outline, and something that transitioned me from the depths of darkness and turmoil. Actually, many years ago, I lost a loved one to suicide. And suicide is not something that was new to me. Actually, my grandfather departed when he was 25, and I believe that it was because of his gifts that he wasn't able to handle or process. But then when I turned close to 25, maybe a little bit younger, one of my really close loved ones had committed suicide. And at this point in my journey, I was deep in addiction. I was living a very dysfunctional, chaotic life. That's really all that I knew. My grandmother was really the only stabilizing force that I'd had. My parents were very young. So all I ever saw was them kind of just stumbling through life. And that was kind of where I was just stumbling. I didn't know where I was going. At this time as well, my gifts were so intense that I didn't know how to work with them. And at the time, too, I didn't want to. It's like when you grow up in a setting, in an environment where you see this and you're like, what is this? And like, as I got older, you get rebellious as a teenager and you're like, this is not what I want. This is not something that I feel called to engage in. And so I pushed a lot of the ancestral gifts and the work away until I was met with the particular death and moment. And it was at that point where really like my foundation had been shaken, and especially with my addictions. And it was, even though the drugs helped suppress the gifts, it also inflamed the gifts in a way that kept me super destabilized. So at that point, I had to have like a coming to God moment, or the ancestral calling is what I call it, where I was like, okay, this is very pivotal. Either I'm going to lean into the healing and do the work and make a difference, and not just in my outer world. It wasn't about, serving other people at that time. It was really about my own self, my own inner foundation, and really my lineages, like all the pain, the trauma. And then now I'm going through this death that was so hard to deal with. I actually had to move back home for a year, work on my sobriety. I really, appreciate my grandmother still being that stable force for me at that time. Because I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have her and the medicine at the same time. So it was in that moment that I just had to surrender. I had to accept the gifts as much as I didn't want to. I leaned into that. And in a way, because also too, in one part of my lineage, we worked a lot with these abilities, but in a really dark and almost controlling and manipulative way. And I didn't realize that those patterns were also coming through in the way that I moved in the world. So there was also a lot of undoing with that as well. I think there was some fear there. Like if I open myself up to this is what I'm going to inherently be doing, and I don't want to cause harm to people. I'd much rather cause harm to myself, right? That was kind of like my mentality at the time. Reflecting back, there was a lot of integration that had to happen, a lot of just falling on my ass again and again and again. If it wasn't also for like my tios, I have two tios. One of them is now departed, but they helped me a lot through once the gifts started to open up to help me stabilize and to manage them. And at the same time, I'm not going to completely negate that, Western psychology did also help me process, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy. So at the same time as losing my cousin, my brother, who has been clinically diagnosed as schizophrenic, from the age of, I think, 14 or 15, and this was mostly drug induced. We were navigating that. So simultaneously, it's like a death, then my brother moving through that, and me trying to support my mother and just hold space for her in the best way that I could. That personal experience with mental health was what also prompted the, oh, I need therapy. Like,
Mm,
yeah, the meditation, those things are all great. Having my teachers, that's all amazing. But there are some deeply, deeply embedded patterns in my brain that I need to explore and I need help. And I
mhm.
need to be able to process that out and talk it out with someone that actually has an awareness. And I'm very grateful for the first therapist. I think it was like divinely orchestrated. She was such a beautiful guide in the way that she, kind of like in the work that you're doing now, because she did a little bit of the spiritual, and she was Mexicana, so that was also, it felt very safe to be able to lean into that. And she was older, had a very, maternal like energy that allowed me to just kind of melt into all the things that I was moving through. And at the same time, she had that education that was really important for me while I was moving through. So cognitive behavioral therapy was one of the major tools initially post the triggering death experience, um, as well as having my teachers being there, being present, my tios helping me kind of just accept that I'm not losing my mind,
Wow.
and a lot of the experiences I kept being met with. And I remember just go back like, is this normal? Does this happen? Do you see this? So many sessions with them as well. And meditation, believe it or not, I know it sounds like so cliche, um, but just sitting in a meditative state helped me rewire my nervous system and really calm the chaos and the chatter that I also found out wasn't all mine, right? Like there were spirits coming through, there were ancestors coming through, and it was just like, what is all this inner dialogue? Who is all this inner dialogue? And in those moments of meditation, I realized, oh, it's not all me. So that was kind of the catalyst that, and it also led me to kind of love the underworld work, like really working with death, really taking people deep into the underworld and bringing them back up as that guide, especially with really intense life-altering events.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I mean, this brings up so many different questions, right? You already mentioned the tools that you turned to in order to help you through these major, major disruptions in your life. I mean, you had to kind of clean yourself and rid yourself and detoxify from your drug use, and then you talked
Hmm.
about the loss of a loved one to
Hmm.
suicide, and then all of the stuff with your brother and helping your mom and navigating all of that. You mentioned in your lineage. So, first question,
Hmm.
what are those gifts that you possess?
Hmm.
The second question, you mentioned that your lineage has also possessed these gifts or similar to, and then some, um, but that they were wielding these in kind of like a very negative way.
Hmm.
So the question there is, how did you deviate from the negativity if that's the only way that they were using them? I
Right.
know that there's like, you have to know the dark to know the light,
Right.
but I would like to know the process that you had to go through to kind of figure
Mhm.
out how to maneuver them or manipulate them into the positive sense.
Yeah, two very good questions. So Specifically with the abilities and gifts, I have been gifted with the ability of sight since I was a young girl.
Mhm.
My father also holds a don, and so does my grandmother. Growing up, we did a lot of healing work in the home. Due to the fact that we lived in a small town, very conservative, and there were a lot of people that were navigating mental health. Mind you, this is like late 90s, early 2000s. So, especially within our culture, people are not going to see therapists yet. They rarely want to go to the doctor for their ailments. So, this is what my grandmother facilitated. And this is kind of where I came into, not kind of, this is where I came into a lot of my gifts. Were her and her good friend, Doña Maria would open up the home every weekend and people would come. If the church couldn't help them, if the medical industrial complex couldn't help them, they were coming to them. So at that time, this is where I really started to commune with spirits. This is where I start to see things that I, couldn't explain, specifically with my sight. Being able to communicate with the dead, that was also something that was very apparent at an early age. And my family knew this, my dad and my grandmother, and they would converse with me and make me feel safe. But it was something that could not leave the home, right? I couldn't go to school and talk about these things, right? I couldn't talk to my friends. So I was very isolated in that experience socially. And this is kind of where I feel, my brother is also a very, very gifted person, but because of his own curiosity and because he did share things outside of the home, this is when the school got involved. And then, later on, he was labeled as schizophrenic. To this day, I really believe that he holds that, I like to say, title for the world to understand him, but not because he is that, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. So, specifically with my gifts, it's the ability to see and perceive um, in between worlds, the dead, guides, spirits, ancestors. Sometimes that's through physical sight. Sometimes that's through claircognizance. It's just a clear knowing that this is what they're communicating. Sometimes it's through clairaudience, and mostly through clairaudience, where I hear information through. And I wouldn't say like I can physically hear it all the time, but it's more of like an internal, almost telepathic voice in my mind. So this is also too where meditation kind of helped slow down that information constantly coming into my stream of consciousness. But those would be the particular gifts that I utilize and that are apparent. I'm sure that there are other things that will come up later in the future, but I'm good right now. We're good where we're at.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then as far as the darker aspects of my lineage, so just to kind of clear it up. On my father's side, his mother has a don, and so did her brother, which is one of the tios I mentioned that's departed, and he still works very closely with me. He was a medicine man, but he also traveled the world and studied Chinese traditional Chinese medicine.
Mhm.
So this is where a lot of the lighter work came in. On my dad, which is my grandfather that committed suicide, his mother was a bruja. Okay. So that would make me on his side a fifth generation bruja. We're from
Mhm.
Durango, if you know, you know. And so when I started to come into my abilities in my early teens, I actually dabbled in a lot of the darker arts and, anything from Santeria. And this is not something that, I hold any shame about. I feel like I had to go through it, honestly, because that was what was naturally calling me. Well, I say naturally, but those imprints. So I dabbled in some of the darker arts because of their influences. They had My grandfather was also a coyote, so you could imagine that a lot of their brujeria was also to protect. They were also involved in trafficking to some degree. So this is kind of where they would utilize their spiritual gifts for protection, but also for manipulation, control. Um, and it left a lot of dense, chaotic energy imprinted into the lineages, which is probably why my grandfather departed at the age of 25, right? It was just too much for him to hold and to carry. There's a lot of karma there too, a lot of ancestral karma.
Mhm.
So when I realized something had to change, this is what prompted the conversation with some of my ancestors, especially like my tias and my great grandmother. I understand that you guys did this work to survive. I understand that you guys lived in a different time. However, the path that I'm choosing to walk now does not require this frequency. So
Mhm.
you actually get to choose right now if you want to step into this loving path and this lighter path with me and we heal together, or I'll check back in when you feel ready. And this was not a conversation that just happened one time. This was multiple conversations, because there would be moments as well where I would be out and about and triggered or upset or angry or like, oh, they're gonna get it. Like, I'm gonna go home and light that vela and that's
Mhm.
it. It's over. It's done. And then I'd be like, wait, who is this?
Yeah.
Like, who actually is this? So I'd sit at my altar and I'd be like, oh, it's you again. Are you ready? You want to walk this path? And that's just something that we're consistently, even still to this day. I'm not going to say that they're in the same consciousness, but the thing is, they were so attached to their stories. They
Yeah.
were so attached to being victims,
Hmm.
and they were not ready to release those narratives, which made it very challenging at times for me to move deeper into the heart-centered work.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in a good place now. We have our good days, we have our bad days. It's
Mhm.
not they're not someone that I work with on a day-to-day basis, but it is an active cultivation that we're trying to mend and create. And I hope that them observing me, observing the work, observing even this conversation puts
Mhm.
more faith in their heart that it's going to be okay if they let go of that story. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it was so well and beautifully explained. Having to come to that conclusion where you have to have these conversations. I mean, this is kind of like doing parts work in therapy, right? Like
Exactly.
we've had parts work for thousands of years, and not only is it parts of ourselves, but those
Right.
lineages of people who came before us that we have to talk to and be like, hey, like I know this isn't mine. And when we don't have the language or the experiences that you and I have had,
Right.
it's even difficult to distinguish like where it's coming from. Like you're like, I'm
Mhm.
not this person, but I don't know
Right.
how to handle it. I don't know how to deal with it. So I appreciate that you're bringing that up because there might be someone listening or watching who's like, I have felt exactly like that. And now I
Mhm.
know that it's not always all me, that it's
Right.
not always coming from me. And, people can sit and reflect about their experiences now and be like, okay, so where is this coming from? Who
Yeah.
do I have to talk to? Because
Exactly.
that's really important. How did you know that you needed to have these conversations, or who guided you to sit? Because it was very beautifully said also, where you were like, hey, this is the path that I'm taking is not it's not the same thing. I'm not in survival mode. Like,
Hmm.
did this come intuitively, or is this something that you were guided to do and taught to do by your tios and your grandma?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a little bit of both.
Mm,
Parts of me knew that the inner dialogue wasn't mine, but it was also conversations and traveling back to the motherland and asking questions. Because when my grandfather transitioned and the way that he transitioned, it was like my grandmother wanted us to know nothing about that side of the family. Cut
mm.
all connections, relations, no
With
part
his family.
with his family specifically because of the density, the darkness, all of that. And so as I got older and came into these impressions and awareness, it required me to go back to the rancho and ask questions. Who were they? What did they do? Why? Why did this go on for so long? Why can I not find any trace of them now? Well, that I later found out they were ran out of the town.
Mm,
But then I did eventually, and my dad had always been somewhat connected to some of my uncles on that side. And so it was also just an exploration of, no matter what they were telling me, don't talk to them, don't open that door. It was like I have to do this. I have to figure out and piece all these things together. And that also required going to the motherland, sitting in those energies, those the connecting with the land spirits as well, because I was curious, what were their relations to the land? If they were working this way, things had to have been in balance, which is why they were ran from the town. So My grandmother, although she was very weary of me opening that up, she also helped me really navigate some of those conversations, give me a really good idea of the type of people they are, but from a not a place of judgment, just
Mhm.
like telling me the way that it was. And then with the conversations, particularly, it actually was one of my tios who is still alive, and he teeter-totters more on Buddhism now. And he's also a
Mhm.
busy man. He has a family and all that, so he doesn't get to practice as much as he would like. But there was a moment where I was dealing with so much ancestral rage. And I was triggered, and I was just always talking about how angry I felt. And he said, "Hey, you know, you gotta have a conversation with your great grandmother." And she was really the point of contact, right? The one that was kind of controlling the whole narrative of all the other people within my lineage.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, for what? I opened up that space. Funny enough, in the time we were actually, my grandmother and I were back home in Durango when this came up. And that same night, when I had a conversation with my great grandma, I was like, you need to basically get it together. Like, this is too much, too dense, and I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of blaming people instead
Mhm.
of looking at myself and realizing that at some capacity, we're all moving through similar things and we're all human at our core. That same night, believe it or not, a tiny little scorpion, one of the like the more powerful ones, came
Mhm.
in and tried to bite my grandmother. And I knew that that was my great grandmother being like, "Hold on." And then that's when it prompted more of a stern conversation and boundaries later on
Yes.
that would follow. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll never forget that. My grandmother knew. She's like, "I'm telling you, it's your great grandma."
But it's so awesome that despite how hard your grandma worked to like keep you away from all of that stuff, she at some point was like, okay, Bree's gonna have to lean into this. And
Yep.
it was great that she was there to guide and support you and that she wasn't doing it judgmentally, like you said.
No.
It's a reality and it was her husband who
Right.
who departed, correct? Right? So
Yep.
that knowledge and wisdom that came from whatever experience she had with him and whatever she saw him going through probably influenced her just opening up and being like,
Yeah.
okay, no, this sounds like something she needs to explore and lean
Yes.
into as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very grateful that she's always been very neutral about those things. And sometimes it can be hard too when they hold their stories, when our elders hold certain stories and maybe it's not the full truth, but I can't say that about my grandmother and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that you bring that up, especially in our community. There's this pressure to save face in the elders and like, oh, que no sepan and don't tell them and like
Yeah.
que se quede, like you said earlier, que se quede en la casa because
Yep.
if we say it, what are people going to think? What are
Water.
people going to say? And that's such a big, big thing in our community that um a lot of people's stories get erased or
Mm-hmm.
we don't have all of the right facts about people and we only have one opinion based off of like the tiny amount of information that they decided to share with us. So
Right.
that is really important and wonderful that your grandma was like, okay, I'm just gonna lay it all out there
Yeah, she knew
and
I'm terca too, so she knew.
no voy a dejar de molestarte hasta que me digas. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I want to backtrack a little bit because you talked about meditation and I haven't like been out loud about it yet, but there's so many different forms of meditation and people
Mhm.
think it's this, I don't know, the Western world kind of ruined it with like, you need to clear your brain of everything and stop
Right.
thinking, basically die in order to meditate, right? Like, we're not going to stop our brains from thinking. And there are
No.
certain different types of meditations that work for different purposes. So, I
Yeah.
feel like if people knew that, then maybe they would lean into and give meditation a little bit more of a chance and
Right.
have some patience with it as well, because it's not going to be magical with like, let's meditate for 1 hour today and I'm going to be fixed and cured, right? Like there's so many levels to it as well. The question here is what type or types of meditation
Mhm.
helped you to find that inner peace so that you could discern which voices were yours and which voices were external that were coming into you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I agree with you on the Western label and sometimes how it can cause resistance for some of us who are trying to find that peace and solitude. For me, in the beginning, a lot of it was earth-based meditation. So I would find particular areas where I knew that the ancestral and land spirits were okay with me being there. And it usually is a quiet, nature-based space. I specifically, because I have a lot of Cancerian energy in my chart as well, water is a very important component or element that I work with. So it always have to be near a stream of water. And there would be no agenda. Obviously, that's usually the that grounding point in meditation, no agenda. However, when I would sit in nature, I would instead of trying to observe the mind or come out of my body or even, I would just listen to what was happening in nature. If it was a water stream, I would just focus on the stream of water. If it was birds, I would just focus on the birds. If I heard a frog, I was just paying attention to the sound of nature organically while also building good relations with the elements around me. And I would consistently go to that spot and just meditate, right? There would be times where sometimes it's a little bit more of channeling. So, it wouldn't always be complete like ego dissolution or coming out of your body or, observing your mind. But that was initially how that started. Now it's kind of evolved, and maybe this is more of like I very much love data, and I feel like there's a lot that we're coming into with heart coherence and breath. And so
Mm,
now a lot of the way that I meditate is through activating that parasympathetic nervous system through heart rate variability and breathing the 5 breaths in, the 5 breaths out, and just keeping that going, right? That's the only thing that I'm focusing on is the breath in and out, in and out.
the
So it's
five
evolved
short
over
breaths.
time. Exactly, exactly. So it's definitely always evolving. And in the beginning, I also listened to like I'm not going to negate, guided meditations. A particular teacher, Muji, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he would do short guided meditation. So that was also a good introduction for anyone that's watching this. It's like, where do I start?
Mhm.
You'll always know if it feels aligned or if it feels like it's spiritual fluff.
Mhm.
Um, so definitely use your discernment in that. But as of right now, that's what meditation looks like for me. And I'll tell you, darling, that I've had some really powerful moments with breath meditation and tea that sometimes feel so much more powerful than being in medicine. Like the
Mhm.
benefit that I get from breath is crazy compared to, and I'm not, saying that plant medicine doesn't do, it serves its purpose. But there have been some really profound experiences in meditation that I never thought I would come to with just breath.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, breath work is such a, I mean, it's really trendy now, but it came from somewhere, right? Like
It's,
there's
yes,
evidence that it has been helpful for certain things.
for
And
centuries.
personally, I haven't been able, especially with that activating breath. It's been a little challenging for me. So I always say that breath work is not for me right now,
Right.
because I already have such an active nervous system. But
Yeah.
for the purposes in which you're using it, I think it sounds like it's very conducive to being able to quiet down and focus so that you can get your heart rate going and then, connect to all of the other elements like you were saying.
Right.
You mentioned with tea, is there a specific type of tea or like I know, we're big on rituals, you and I. So is there a whole ritual that goes behind this meditation for you? What kind of tea do you use? How long? Like what purpose does it serve you? How long you do it for?
So with the teas, in the beginning, I work with a lot of flower essences as well. I don't know, I just feel very called to florals. They kind of make me giddy and,
Mhm.
in love with their essences. So,
Yeah.
mostly with rose essence. So, like if I'm working with the rose tea, I started off with Blue Lotus before it kind of popped off, which, I'm
Yeah.
glad that people are discovering or rediscovering. But that was a very powerful herb to work with. And I correct myself because I recently was in a Taoist meditation where I learned, and tea ceremony, where I learned that there's actually only one type of tea. And it comes from a very ancient tree in, I believe, India. Everything else is just herbs. So it's like we can't really call it tea, like a rose tea or like a blue lotus tea is not actually tea. It's
Okay.
like an herb drink. And that was something new
Yeah.
for me. I never knew that. It definitely blew
Yeah.
my mind. I felt very humbled
Yeah.
in that experience. But you know, I'm not as rigid. That was just like out of respect for the space and the
Sure.
facilitator and the information. But now, you know, I will also let the herbs communicate with what I need, what my body
Mhm.
needs. If there's certain impressions that are coming through, I'll go to the apothecary. Like recently, I was dealing with some like lymphatic system stuff, so I went to the herb bar and picked up some curated tea for the lymph system. So it really varies, and honestly, I'm listening to what my body is telling me I need and also what my biofield, you know, because these essences, when we consume them, their power stays within our biofield for a
Mhm.
certain amount of time. So if it's like, you know, I'm struggling with grief or there's things that feel stuck in my heart, I'm going to go to the essence of rose. I'm going to work with that in a tea and meditation. And then that's going to stay in my field, just like when you consume plant medicines. You're feeling those effects weeks after because that essence is still in the biofield working.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you for answering that question.
Yeah.
Especially, the part about the breath work, like you said, sometimes people can have psychedelic experiences without actually taking the plant medicine. And
Right.
I have heard wonderful things about breath work when you're able to achieve that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I have so many other questions that are coming up, but this is about your sacred disruption and how it
Yeah.
shifted your life. So we can go back into the questions. We talked about the modalities and how you knew to turn to them. Um, it talking about where you were in life in your early 20s and the
Mhm.
struggles that you were dealing with. There's a loss of self that comes with all of that, right? And kind of like a pushing self to the side, especially given the fact that tienes estos dones that you kind of want to like drown out.
Yeah.
And in the process of drowning them out, like they're exacerbated at the same time. How did these experiences that you mentioned that were such a major disruption and pivot in your life help you to reclaim yourself and your voice?
Yeah. Mm. It definitely wasn't easy. You know,
Mm,
I definitely call it the like coming out of the psychic closet is what it felt like. There was a lot of shame around like, is there that the question that would keep coming up with, is there something wrong with me?
yeah.
You know, especially with my brother going through his process. That was something that consistently came up. And I really think the shame was a root to the addiction. And also, you know, seeing my father being addiction because of his own and not being able to manage it properly at the time when he was younger. So that was kind of where I started was with the shame and releasing and reminding myself that there isn't anything wrong with me, right? This is just the way that my consciousness has been designed.
Mm,
This is the way that I've been brought into the world and what has been gifted to me, although it's looked like a wound for so long. I had to lick my own wound and realize that, oh, actually, it's a gift.
mm,
And I don't have to be embarrassed or ashamed, but I do have to be discerning. I was still in a time where this, you know, a lot of what's open and out now wasn't mainstream yet, right? It was still very much like, oh, this girl's kooky. So there was also an importance of discerning when I could be open and in that space and be able to share and connect with people that made my nervous system and that, again, those root issues feel safe. You know, and you evolve and it gets easier over time, but you know, sometimes that wave will still come in of, oh my, is this too much? You know, is
mm,
this, am I going to be like on Pluto and everyone is still on Earth?
yeah.
Um, you know, so there's a lot of grounding that has to come with that as well and integrating, but going back to some of those root feelings of shame and just not feeling really interconnected with, uh, you know, society, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. I mean, that's great that you bring all of that up and all of the different layers that come with the reclamation of yourself because kind of like you mentioned with your brother earlier, he has this diagnosis that the Western world gave him because they don't understand
Right.
what is actually truly going on with him in the spiritual world and
Right.
what his gifts truly are. I think that goes for everyone who has these abilities where
Mhm.
we feel like outcasts and definitely with living in the United States and colonization, but like it doesn't matter, right, in what part of the world because colonization exists and with some religions coming into play and those religions shaming you for having these abilities and using these types of spiritual tools, it's kind of scary
Hmm.
to, you know, get out of the closet, like you said, to step out of that closet and like claim not this is who I am, this is
Right.
part of me, this is part of my lineage, and it's part of what makes me me. So, what was that process like for you? I mean, you said it was something difficult, but how did you know you were on the other side of that to be like, no, this is me, and I'm
Hmm.
gonna now unapologetically, I mean, not only this is part of your work, but like I'm
Right.
gonna unapologetically listen to it because you said initially it started for yourself before
Hmm.
it became of service for others. And
Yeah.
I'm asking this question for everyone who's listening, but also with a little bit of a personal ulterior motive there because I'm working through my claircognizance and kind of developing and strengthening that gift to myself. And yo también tengo familia that's like totally like that's not a thing.
Mhm.
Estás loca, eres una bruja, and but like shaming me, right? I don't know how far down the lineage that goes because in immediate families and even two, three generations past, as far as I know, none of this has come up. Nobody has been in this kind of field before. So the fact that I possess these gifts, I'm like, there's got to be somewhere down the lineage. And
Right.
I won't say who because I don't want to out anyone, but
Yeah.
there is a very close family member to me who has very similar gifts to me. But they also kind of like I was telling you before we started recording, they also kind of just put it on, oh, it's just synchronicity. It's
Right.
just happenstance or coincidence. But don't really lean into it. And they're like they have super prophetic dreams and their intuition is just on point. Like this inner knowing. So what was that like for you where you're like, I'm just gonna embody this 100% and lean into it?
Yeah. Yeah. Really, at the time when my cousin had transitioned, once he got to the other side, he was basically like, "Are you ready? I'm here now."
Mm,
Whatever work I was doing in the physical world, my frequency could not handle the density of Earth, but now I'm here on the other side. Are you ready? I could see him, I could communicate with him, and I was scared. I was scared shitless that I was like, oh no, I've been running from this, and now like he's right here in my ear, and it's like as if he's in physical form, but on the other side, and now he's quite literally pushing me into this what felt like a safety net, like I'll be here no matter what.
yeah.
This is uncomfortable. This is going to be scary. I know I've gone through my own shit, my own darkness. This is why I'm no longer in the physical body. Are you ready?
Mhm.
So I feel very grateful. And it's not that that hadn't happened before with other loved ones, but because we had such a close relationship, he was like a brother to me.
Yeah.
And we grew up together. This relationship and dynamic felt a lot different than, my great grandmother coming through and
Mhm.
telling me, lean and into it, open your heart. This was like, oh shit, this is my primo.
Yeah.
We're shooting the shits, and now he's on the
Mhm.
other side, and he's like, you got to lean into this now. It's
Mhm.
time. I'm here now to help you. You're gonna be okay. You're
Yeah.
gonna be okay.
Yeah. Oh,
So
so you knew when you had that support, okay, I'm gonna do this and this is me.
Yeah, and in a way, we were guiding each other, right? I'm not going to say that when he went to the other side, his consciousness had full capacity to heal himself. It was kind of like we're doing this together. Because he also struggled when he transitioned, he was actually in addiction.
Mhm.
So it was like, okay, well, I guess we're doing this together. And we're kind of both like baby deers, ironically enough, with the card,
With the card.
learning
Yeah, we'll
to
share those at the end.
learning to walk again. And so
Yeah.
we just kind of helped each other walk this path. And he observed me and I observed him. And it made it less scary as well, knowing that, like, okay, he's got me.
Yeah. So you've talked a lot about how this, I mean, this definitely helped you root into your ancestral power because you know this is part of your lineage. And you
Mhm.
mentioned going back to the motherland and connecting. But you also mentioned CBT coming in and
Hmm.
helping you with all of the traumatic experiences I imagine that you experienced growing up. How, if at all, was CBT and all of the spiritual work that you were doing intertwined at
Hmm.
any given point throughout this journey for you?
Yeah, that is a good question. So like I had mentioned, the therapist at the time, who I truly felt was divinely brought to me, she worked in both worlds. She also, was from San Antonio, so that was naturally intertwined in their community and day to day. And she made it very clear that it was not going to be just Western, therapizing, that there were going to be elements that she opened up and not forced upon you, but allowed you to feel safe
Mhm.
and lean into some of these things. So as we were going through the cognitive behavioral therapy, she would ask me, well, how would you handle this ancestrally? What would you utilize? Could we set up something like a bath or, a ceremony or a ritual? And so we worked and collaborated together on what that looked like, the cadence of these things, what came through these experiences, processed through together. And I really feel like it was the safety that she provided me. Again, I want to go back to that feeling of shame and feeling like I'm crazy. That was also a really scary feeling to have, and then to go into therapy and go, oh no, they're gonna make notes. They're gonna diagnose me. And having that ability to express some of these ancestral modalities and rituals and ceremonies that I had been doing and ingrained in my memory since a child, her acceptance of that and her actually encouraging me more to lean into that, although the focus was cognitive behavioral therapy, it helped immensely. And I don't Again, I feel like that was divinely brought to me because I was so resistant to therapy as well, because I thought, they're going to diagnose me. And that was my
Yeah,
biggest fear.
yeah, yeah. And I love that you brought that up and have you've mentioned several times now that it was like divinely brought to you because there are very few of us who are licensed therapists who meddle into,
I know.
the spiritual stuff, right? Because it's black and white,
Yep.
it's one or the other. And I think that really it was like a godsend for you to find a human being that helped you navigate through all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are very few and far between of us who do that stuff.
I know. That's why when you mentioned that this is something, I was like, yes, I really feel the field is ready to receive this. We need more therapists that can make other people feel safe about that without the fear of the notes or what's going into the system, the labels, because that it really is the scariest part sometimes when we think about Western medicine in that context.
Yeah, the diagnoses for sure. And without even taking into consideration that some of these diagnoses are like coping mechanisms that we've developed that aren't really a part of our person. Even the personality disorders
Yeah,
are survival mechanisms that we had to take on as armor
right.
to, survive whatever it was that we were living through growing up. So yeah, I definitely want to present therapy from a different lens so that it doesn't feel so cut and dry, super clinical, and
Yeah.
just let people know that there are other aspects to them and other ways to approach their healing that
Yes.
isn't just the clinical, I'm going to diagnose you and I'm going to numb you with medicine model that
Yep. Hmm.
exists currently, because the amount of clients, I mean, we've been speaking Spanglish, so clearly la comunidad para mí que está en mi corazón siempre va a ser la comunidad latina. Obviously, I want to help as many people as I
Yep.
can on this earth, and understanding where I come from, where we come from, the struggles, the decolonizing, the healing our nervous systems, the healing lineages behind us, like so many different levels of layers of trauma that we've gone through.
Right.
I feel like especially with our community, there are so many more aspects to us that we can holistically heal instead of just ascribing to the Western model. That would be really, really helpful for us to be understood and not be labeled, because some of our diagnoses, like I said, come from survival mode or from colonization, passed down
Right.
generationally, like all that generational trauma. It's like, I'm actually not borderline. These are behaviors that I needed to be sneaky and needed to be, this type of person
Right.
to be convenient for the white body
Right.
generations behind me. So, all the things. I mean, I could go into, so that's a whole other
Yeah,
podcast. Like,
definitely.
I'm like, how much
Definitely.
more can I say? But yeah, no, I mean, we started with your therapist in San Antonio that like dabbled in the spiritual, and so happy that you were able to find that, and
Yeah.
that you are now of service to the community. So I guess that is another question that isn't on the questions that I sent you, but at what point did you realize I could use this gift not just for myself, but to
Mhm.
help the community around me?
Yeah. It definitely took some time to get to that point. Like I said, most of what this started for me was really for my own self.
Mhm.
And as I progressed deeper, the responsibility grew larger.
Mhm.
And then, I feel like we're all met at some point with like, what are we doing with our quote unquote career or life's calling, life's purpose? And so then I was at this apex there as well, where I just felt it was it was really hard to walk in two worlds, right? To constantly have this inner world communication and then having to show up and go to work every day. And I'm
In the
like, hold
3D
on,
world,
sis.
yeah.
Yeah, like, oh no. And then it was like an ancestor came to me and said, well, you were meant to serve. You've been supporting your maestra since a young girl, and this is the way that your grandmother and my Theo made a living. Granted, at this time, the framework for it was not the way that it looks now, and sometimes I even fight with myself, and I'm sure, there are a lot of others therapists and spiritual healers that, struggle with this. We don't want to charge for this because the way that it was back then was you showed up to my grandma's house with an offering. So either that was food, you were going to pay her light bill, you were going to, but it wasn't my grandmother, I'm charging you X amount of money for this service.
Yeah.
So that was also a big thing that I had to overcome and something that, she really helped me and my dad a lot was knowing that times have changed. We have to support ourselves. Things have to be sustainable. And at the same time, there's an energetic exchange that's happening and that has to match. So I never thought that I would end up on this path. I mean, I don't think any of us really do. If it were up to me, like I would have, I wanted to be like a fashion designer and all these things, and I got to do all of that. That was fun. But the responsibility was something I just wasn't going to be able to. Um, and so I just reflected back on what went on in the home and how that looked like and how that could look like now and how it's evolved and. So I'm very grateful that I had those earlier experiences and I've also overcome the fear of like charging for these types of things,
Yeah.
Which don't get me wrong, I still love a good trade for trade and I'll always, I'll always prompt that if I can. So I've had some really great relationships start that way. But at the same time, we're in a completely different era for sure.
Yeah, we are. And, it's not for nothing that you mentioned that it's a whole energy exchange. And it is these experiences and these services can be very, very draining to our mind, body, and spirit. So, it's not for nothing
Yeah.
that that's what that's called. So yeah, I'm glad that you're not afraid to charge for these experiences anymore because it's so valuable. It's such a who in not everybody has this gift where you can hear a loved one, you can hear somebody and see people, and we can get so much information and so much guidance for our lives from these kinds of services that definitely it is something very, very invaluable. And anybody who thinks they can get away with not not paying for it or paying little, even, something like that. We got to think about it before we go and ask people for their services like that.
For sure. For
Yeah. So I guess what these were really, really, really tough things that you had to go through. And as I mentioned initially, we have to go through the dark to be able to recognize the light.
Mhm.
And something amazing came from all of those things that happened to you. What would you say are the things that you are the most grateful for as a result of this sacred disruption in your life?
Yeah. Meeting my teacher death, I feel that it was as like morbid and dark as that sounds. Death has been my biggest teacher and continues to be my biggest teacher, and I feel the most comfortable at times being in that energy and being okay with being in that energy. And I'm just grateful that I leaned into that without the initial human programming, which is that of fear. And that probably has a lot to do with culturally, our culture, very, like you had mentioned with the Dia de los Muertos, we very much honor and have so much reverence for death. And she continues to guide me through all of it. And I'm just so grateful, despite all of the heartache and the turmoil and the dysfunction, I'm just grateful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, so, especially in this country, people are so afraid of death instead of celebrating a
Right.
person's life and transitioning over to the other side. So, the fact that that is one of your teachers and your guides is is very beautiful, and it's very like telling of how comfortable you are with who you are and where you are in life right now as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
wonderful. Well, anything else that I haven't asked already that you would like people to know about this sacred disruption? Um, yeah, that you think is important for people to know or learn about this.
Mm. We are in some of the most prophetic times, and I feel that more and more of us are going to come into these ancestral callings. The best advice, not the best advice, take it as you will. If you want to take it, take it. If not, that's okay too. But answer the call. Be
Mhm.
curious about the call and answer the call.
Mhm.
And because we are the ones that we have been waiting for.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
I love that so much. Yeah. We definitely are shifting towards needing more people like us to ground and with everything that is going on globally and in this country.
yeah.
We're going to be called upon very, very soon. So, if not already being started to be called upon. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Um, and finally, if you could share with our audience like, where they can find you, the website, your socials, and any upcoming things or events that you have that you would love it if people joined you for or showed up at.
Yeah. Oh, this is always the like crunchy part of
Yeah.
for me at least. I'm still working through all of that. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can check out my work at www.ojopantera.com. That's also where you can find me on socials if you're in that world. All of my energetic and creative services can be found there. And I do have a really fun and exciting creative slash spiritual project coming up. So you can follow that on Substack at Ojo Pantera as well.
Okay. Awesome. And you mentioned earlier that you wanted to be like this fashion designer or whatever, but I think you're doing it beautifully in the way that, I mean, when people go to your website and they see everything that you do, you're mixing everything so beautifully and kind of answering both callings and both missions that you
I'm
have in this life
trying.
very beautifully. So I'm really, every time I see one of your posts, I'm like, oh my God, what else did she do? Like, what fashion show or which runway was she at? Because it's like
Yeah.
super awesome to see those worlds kind of intertwine.
Thank you. I appreciate
Wow.
that a lot.
Very talented. I love seeing all of that artwork.
Lovely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me and
Yeah.
answering all of these questions about your sacred disruption, for being as vulnerable as you were today. I know, like you said, sometimes some of these topics could be difficult to share about, but you are fully in who you are meant to be. And I think we need more people who look like us to share that sovereignty, that voice reclamation, that identity work that we've done, to model for others what it looks like to step out from under colonization and fully step into who we were meant to be. So I really, really appreciate you sharing everything that you did today.
Oh, Mateo, thank you for having me, darling, and for facilitating this powerful portal. And I'm also looking forward to all the new offerings and work that's coming up for you. I'm super, super excited.
How amazing was that episode? I absolutely loved everything that she shared, and it, the importance of leaning into the gifts, los dones que se nos dieron, that were given to us, whether it's just something that's by happenstance happening in your body or that occurred in your lineage. um, it's so important to lean into those things, and I really appreciated that she mentioned that we are in some deeply prophetic times right now, in which more spiritual services are going to be sought out to kind of help to ground the community and the collective after everything that's kind of surfaced in recent times, not only locally in this country of the US, but globally, things that are happening globally where there are some major shifts happening. Lots of spiritual work is going to be done, not only personally, but it's going to be sought out as well. So I really enjoyed that she mentioned that. We didn't actually mention the cards that came up for us for before our podcast um, recording. So I want to share those with you all now. I pulled from my inner child oracle and I pulled from my mushroom oracle, and the cards that we got are: you know the way, trust your intuition on this journey. And I feel like, we don't have Bree here to kind of confirm what I'm about to say, but it seems like that was one of the large messages that she conveyed to us in this episode, was like, trust your intuition. She actually said, if you are feeling like something like this is calling you, answer the call. So I feel like this card goes really well. And she mentioned, that she felt like a baby deer, and this deer, um, or deer-like creature popped up. So that's why she said ironically. But I feel like this card definitely resonated with what she shared. Become aware, listen to the wisdom of the body. Again, answer the call. And of course, Ojo Pantera is her site and her brand. And she has, this dark jaguar panther on her website. And this is the creature that appears on the card. So definitely listening to the wisdom of your body goes along with her story and her sacred disruption. And further down with the mushroom oracle, further ahead with the mushroom oracle, we got the seer. She talked about claircognizance and clairaudience, and that she is able to see spirits and people who have crossed over to the other side. This was one of the cards that came through with lucidity, perception, and future coming in. The fairy ring coming in with portal, serendipity, and risk. And I'll read the description for this one because I'm currently not quite clear on the connection with it, but I feel like the description will enlighten us. And then oyster is the feast, heroic, and a multitasker. So this one makes a little bit more sense because, Bree was talking about how where's the book? That she, wanted to be this fashion designer, and she gets to create and be in fashion and braid people's hair and stage fashion shows and dance moves. And you all should see her dance moves on Instagram. She is great. She's great at choreography and definitely a wonderful, wonderful multitasker. So let's look at what the fairy, oh my God, I actually opened to the fairy ring page. The fairy ring is as gateways to magical realms. Fairy rings represent both danger and fortune, enchantment and peril. Do you dare to step inside? I think this one kind of this card goes along with how Bree shared the light and the dark that comes with dabbling into the spiritual realm. And she chose to not follow the darkness that had been in her family, out of survival, out of necessity, basically, to use the spiritual and the bruja stuff for negative purposes. But just the being able to step into this world, both light and dark exist, and you get to make that choice, right? So it's a risk, and you decide which way you take it. So I'm so excited that all of these came up because they are definitely correlated with the information and the content that Bree shared. And then just for the oyster cleans up after human destruction, soaking up oil spills, breaking down plastics, and eating pollution. What efforts help? What efforts enable? So with her having mentioned that more of the spiritual realm is going to be needed in this prophetic time of ours, the oyster, we are the oysters, the seers, the helpers, the spiritual guides are the oysters that will help to clean up whatever messes have been made. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Oh my goodness, I learned so much, and I was left with a lot of questions, and I hope that I can ask her some more questions later on down the line, either in an episode or in person. But thank you so much for joining today and taking the time to watch this episode. If you have any questions about anything that you heard here today, go ahead and reach out to Bree directly in her socials. I've already added them down in the description, or also to me. I mean, I don't know, you may have questions for me as well, but go ahead and ask them, and I hope to see you all on the next Doses of.